Okay, good morning, class. So this is the last topic of our class this semester. We will be talking about ideology, which is still part of the so-called political philosophy. So you may have heard a lot about ideology in your life, but then we should go deeper into the definition of what ideology means. So even though the word seems to be far from us, but actually we probably have applied it in our everyday life. So these are some definition or explanation. The term ideology refers to a system of dominant ideas and beliefs that affect every sphere of human social interaction and organization, be they political, economic, scientific, educational, and cultural. So basically, if we talk about ideology, it means it refers to this dominant belief, what most people in that place believe or follow. That would be the ideology. And Downs defined ideology as a verbal image of the good society and of the chief means of constructing such a society. And in most democracies, it means that an orientation to political parties or political ideology. So every time we talk about ideology, it will usually relate to political ideology. So before we go deeper into the discussion of the political philosophy, let me start with some preliminary questions. Um, First one, can humans live alone? Well, in theory and in practice, yes, there are some people who can literally live alone without the help of others, although it is impossible to um, avoid interaction with others, because especially if you live in a city. But if you live in the jungle by yourself, yes, it is possible to live alone. But it is feasible. Uh, Most people will not see it as a feasible to live by yourself because we are as a social beings, so we need others to help us. Of course, if we're sick, if we need food or if we need help, we need other people. So to answer the first questions, I think majority would say that no, we cannot live alone. But we now go back to the time during the pandemic where we are forced to live alone, isolated, especially if you are caught the virus. If you caught the virus, then you are being isolated in your room for maybe 1 week and you don't see others much. You probably only see one or two person, and that's it. And of course, pandemic has brought some consequences. Some people become stressful, and many of them died not because of the virus itself, but because of the loneliness, because the pressure of isolation, or maybe after the pandemic, there are some people who cannot go back to their original mental state where they have this psychological problem because what have happened to them or to their family. So we can tell that it is quite difficult, yeah, not to be to able to socialize. And luckily we have lots of instruments or social media that can connect us to other people, but still it's different from real life interaction with other human beings. So number two, I would say that not many of us are happy about being isolated during pandemic. Even an introvert probably feels that it is not something that should be celebrated. to be isolated all the time during the pandemic. So hopefully we learn a lot from the pandemic that we all had survived. So this illustration shows that on the left is someone who's alone in a room, and the other one is someone who is alone in the jungle, sleeping on a big uh, wood logs. But yeah, they are pretty much the same, isolated from civilization or other people. So going back to the situation, this is the background of what we are going to discuss. So as the background, we humans are sociable species. We begin as a tribal groups who lives in caves and who live in a very uncivilized manner, but still we are living as a group, because even at that time, uh, the early human thinks that it is good to have groups rather than to hunt by yourself, for example, or to gather alone. So from the tribal groups, then uh, human evolutionized to societies, and through the societies suddenly they become states and becomes nation countries that we know today. They are all united by certain geographical, political background that makes them believe that they are one part of one nation. And because there are other people who have different language, let's say, different political background or ideology, then these people in a one group of area will create borders, and then they will create institution and centralization of law and warfare, and that's when eventually countries are established, nations are established. So it started with something that have something in common. They share the same language, same ideology, same geolocation, and then suddenly they think that they should be united and they should make a borders that separate them from other people who have different language, political background, and so on. And you can see on the right one, that is the illustration that shows the border between US on the left and the Mexico on the right. So you can see that there's a straight line, yeah, somewhere on the left, not really in the middle, but you can see the difference where the US side is basically like a quite empty space, just several buildings. But the Mexico City, on the other hand, is like bustling cities, lots of houses and buildings. But you can see that there's a clear separating borders between the two countries. And here we will see another sort of like weird borders that literally cut a restaurant and cut a building into two different places. So this is the border between the Netherlands on the left and Belgium on the right. So if you're staying in that in the left illustration, if you sit there and then one of your feet is crossing that sign, then it means that you are standing in two countries, Netherlands and Belgium. And in the right illustration, we can see that this border literally cut this house. So the door is basically the border. Yeah. So if you enter the room, you turn left, it's Belgium. But if you go to the restroom maybe or the bathroom, it will be in Netherlands. So one building situated in two countries. So this is an imaginary border. I mean, there's no fences, no nothing that separate the two countries. It's just that uh, this border that is not seen, yeah. But still, they have drawn that border to separate these two countries. In another instance, we can see the border is not on the land, but the river becomes the border. So what separates these three countries is the river. So there's Argentina, and then there's Brazil, and I forgot the other one uh, on the north. But we can see that the borders here are quite the border here is quite evidence, yeah, because you can see the river. So if you cross the river into the other side of the land, then you will reach another country. But the river itself, it means that they belong to both countries. Maybe half of them belongs to the one country and the other half belong to the other country. So it's quite uh, fluid, this border. And then the last illustration showing this line between USA Canada. So if you go to the north of North America and you go into the northern part of it, then you will see this line along the I think along the continent that separate USA from Canada. So you can literally stand in two countries when you stand in the middle of that line. And not only in Europe or South America, Indonesia also has some borders with other countries. Especially in Kalimantan, we have borders with Malaysia, and then in Timor Island, we have Timor Leste and also uh, the Timor, and then in the east, Papua and the Papua New Guinea. And this is a story of one Indonesian kid, Nursaka, who has to go abroad every single day when he goes to school.
Ya, selanjutnya pemirsa, demi menuntut ilmu, seorang anak SD harus melintasi perbatasan Malaysia dan Indonesia setiap hari.
Setiap hari demi menuntut ilmu ya Prabu. Nah ini meski ia tinggal di Malaysia, ia pun lebih memilih bersekolah di Entikong, Kalimantan Barat.
Demi menuntut ilmu, bocah bernama Nur Saka. Ya, selanjutnya pemirsa, demi menuntut ilmu, seorang anak SD harus melintasi perbatasan Malaysia dan Indonesia setiap hari.
Setiap hari demi menuntut ilmu ya Prabu. Nah ini meski ia tinggal di Malaysia, ia pun lebih memilih bersekolah di Entikong, Kalimantan Barat.
Pos lintas batas negara atau PLBN. Gunakan pas lintas batas atau PLB.
Demi menuntut ilmu, bocah bernama Nur Saka ini harus berjuang ekstra melintasi batas dua negara, Malaysia, Indonesia. Meski tinggal di Tebedu, Malaysia, Saka memilih tetap bersekolah di Entikong, Kalimantan Barat. Walhasil, setiap hari ia harus melintasi pos lintas batas negara atau PLBN menggunakan pas lintas batas atau PLB.
Karena tiap hari keluar negeri, Nur Saka hebat dari selebritas Syahrini.
Netizen pun mengapresiasi tekad belajar Nur Saka. Sejak kisahnya masuk di lini masa Twitter, Ditjen Imigrasi.
Alright, so that's
aktivitas aliansi pelintas batas cilik disukai lebih dari 3.300 netizen.
Kid who lives in Malaysia, although he is Indonesian, but because he wants to study in Indonesia, so every single day he has to pass this border patrol or border area. So he has to. I think his passport is going to be full of stamp because well, he does it almost every day, yeah, except maybe weekend. So that's an example of how border, which is sometimes obvious, like there's a building or a fence, but sometimes they are not clear because we cannot see any border or anything. We even don't know that we have crossed a border and go into another country. So again, this border becomes sort of like what separate one country to another, yeah, especially those who lives in a landlocked or a continent that has to divide their area with other countries. But in Indonesia, mostly because we are archipelagic, so we don't have too many borders. So it's quite different from countries in South America or in Europe, where there are a lot of countries that has to, divide their land into with other countries. All right, so let's go back to the topic itself, which is political philosophy. So what does it mean by political philosophy? So political philosophy studies the best principle for organizing such a state. And this doesn't have to be in a very broad topic like a nation or state, but if you are a leader in a group, in your own group, you can also apply this kind of political philosophy, because as a leader you will want to have the best principle for organizing your group. And the normal assumption of political philosophy is that a state or a group of people or whatever aims to make its citizen happy. So that's the major assumption. So no state, you actually, well, at least not no normal state will want the citizens to be unhappy or sad or angry. They all want their people to be happy living in that state, because that is how you can manage your country, to make everyone happy. And political philosophy also refers to political system and political ideology. So we have two things here, political system and political ideology, and both are under the umbrella of political philosophy. So let's see what's the difference between political system and political ideology. Okay, so this is the types of political system. So one of them is democracy. Democracy is a political system, and what democracy is, as you probably already know, it is a political system that allows for each individual to participate, such as what happened in US or Indonesia, and the decisions on the top are made by representatives, or in Indonesia it is through DPR and MPR. So this is a political system where we as a citizen can participate. We can choose our own presidents, we can choose our own representatives, and hopefully those representatives will become our voice to create such policy that can benefit us as a citizen. And most significant aspects of democracy is freedom of speech and also freedom of belief. They are of great importance in democratic states. So if you're living in a democracy but you don't have freedom of belief or freedom of speech, then it's not real democracy. The second type of political system is monarchy, which is ruled by a king or a queen. And there are three kinds of monarchy. The first one is constitutional monarchy, like in Japan, Netherlands, and UK. It means that the monarchy here is not the one that literally run the government, because they will have prime minister who sort of like president in a democratic country, but because they are constitutional, so they are not called president, but they're called prime minister. Yeah, so like Japan has prime minister, Netherlands as well, and also the UK. And then the second type of monarchy is the absolute monarchy, which happens in Oman and Saudi Arabia. So here the king is literally the dominant ruler. So what the king says, then you will do what the king says. No one can reject or have different opinion, because it is an absolute monarchy. So the king is the sole power in that country, like in Oman and Saudi Arabia. And then the third type of monarchy is parliamentary. It means that they have a different parliament, and this parliament will be the one that control the government, which is quite different from the constitutional one. The third political system is oligarchy. Oligarchy ruled by a group or small number of people, like in China or North Korea, they are oligarchy. And yeah, this is the illustration. So oligarchy is rule overview. So let's say in a company, for example, if this big company is ruled by the richest person in the group, for example, there are three rich persons, then they are the one who rule the company, then the company is based on oligarchy because it is controlled by the three powerful person. And in China and North Korea, it's oligarchy because they are ruled by one dominant party. Yeah, in China we have the Communist Party, which is very strong, as well as in North Korea, the Kim dynasty is the only family that rules the country for many years. And then the fourth type of political system is theocracy. So theocracy from the word God, ruled by religious leader, which is happening in Afghanistan, Iran, and also Vatican. So Vatican is theocracy because the top ruler is not president or prime minister or king, but is a religious figure. And then the fifth political system is republic. So republic is any political system in which the citizens legitimize the government. So it is the citizen who can give legitimation to the government, not the government or some group of people, but it is the citizen themselves. So there are 5 different types of republic. Like we have a crowned republic, like a constitutional monarchy, and then single party republic like Russia, and then capitalist like it is the economic system, and then in US they're using federal republic because they have different states, and these states can have different rules from the center government. And the last type is the parliamentary republic. So then the questions would be, some people would ask, what's then the difference between democracy and republic? Because in Indonesia, for example, we are republic and we also democratic. So the main characteristics of a republic is that the government is subject to the people and leaders can be recalled. So for example, if you look at the illustration in republic, the people on the bottom, they vote and they vote their representative, and then their representatives will usually have meetings about making some rules, and then they vote, and then the law comes out. In democracy, sometimes the people can literally vote directly to create some laws without getting to the representatives. For example, in a lower level of government, they can create their own law that can, that fits to their area or environment. It doesn't have to go through the representative. So that's why we have both democracy system and also republic system in our country. So to clarify further the difference between democracy and republic, it lies in the limits placed on government by the law, which has implication for minority rights. So both forms, republic and democracy, tend to use a representational system. So they have representatives in the government. That is, citizens vote to elect politicians to represent their interests and form the government. So that's the similarities. Yeah, so they have representatives that the citizens themselves voted. And then there's also this term despotism or dictatorship. So what kind of system is this? This is a system where the country or a nation is ruled by someone or some groups who seize the government by force. So this is what separated from oligarchy. Oligarchy also ruled by some group of people, but in despotism or dictatorship, it's usually seized by power. So there's a coup d'etat to take over the government, and then they become the leader. And the example is North Korea, which is still, still exists today, and also Cuba. But if we go back to the Second World War in the 1930s, 40s, then the example would be Mussolini in Italy and also Adolf Hitler in Germany. And those people that I mentioned can also be called their style of ruler can also be called totalitarianism. So from the word total, so this is a political system or a system of government where the state recognizes no limits. So that's important, no limits to its authority. So whatever they want to do, the citizen cannot rebel. Well, they may be able to rebel, but the government will suppress it just like that. So it strives to regulate every aspect of public and private life wherever feasible. So they will want to have full control on any aspects of public and private life. So that's why it's called totalitarianism. Like, of course, again, the example is in North Korea today, where you cannot, let's say, if you watch K-drama or listen to K-pop songs, then you will most likely be hanged or punished by death. Not only you, but your whole family will also get punishment. So that's how totalitarianism works. They try to control every aspects of your life, and private and public. So it's a scary style of political system, and we can still see it in North Korea, and in a way also a bit in China, although it's not as cruel as in North Korea, but China also has this sort of totalitarianism system. So if you look at the political system again, this is some illustration that show the 6 different political systems. So in democracy, we can see citizens are lining up and they can vote for their representatives. In dictatorship, there's this one usually militaristic figure who control the people, and the people they have to obey and respect, or else they get punished by death. And then in the republic, the people will cheer someone who they voted to become their leader. And in aristocracy, it's about who gets the money, and the richest will gain power over people who are not as rich as him. So like in companies, but also in some countries ruled by some group of people who are dominant or powerful because their wealth. And then in monarchy, everyone bows down to the king. So the king is their supreme leader. Anarchy is the chaos. So it is not a political system, but it's a chaos. So everyone can do whatever they want, and sometimes there are some leaders, but they probably will not be leaders that long, because anything can happen to them, because this has no rules. There's no rules, there's nothing. So everyone can just take over if they can by defeating the most powerful one, and this is quite scary. In some African countries nowadays, which are in wars, are falling into this anarchist system where everyone can just do whatever to get power, including doing violence. Right, now next we will see several types of ruling power. So what's the difference between autocracy, technocracy, and democracy? So this is the political system that we have discussed, but let's see what's the advantage and disadvantage of these 3 different political systems. So the first one, autocracy, the type is government by one. if you remember that this is a type of political system where the rich or the powerful rule the whole country. And technocracy, from the word techno, it means that the government is ruled by experts, not political figures, but experts. And democracy is the type where the government ruled by many people who can vote their representatives. And the advantages of being an autocratic country is that the decision takes will be swift, fast. Because why? Because they don't have to have argument. There's no debate. There's no negotiation. When the ruler said A, then it is A. So the decision will be swift, fast. In technocracy, the advantages is the welfare, because they protect those who need help. And in democracy, the advantages is the restraints of excessive power. So in democracy, you can limit the power of the people you chose. So every 5-10 years, you cannot rule again. So you have to, someone has to replace you. So there's no power that is long life, yeah, because there's some limit, like 10 years or 2 periods. That's the advantages of democracy. What about the disadvantages? In autocracy, it is bad life for the people, because what the autocracy decide may not be the best for the people. And in technocracy, the disadvantages probably that the taxes would be so high. And the disadvantages in democracy is the slow decisions, because there are so many people with so many ideas, so many arguments. Sometimes just to make just one rule or policy, it can take months and months, and the policy never established. It's different from the autocracy, which can be released easily. But that's the disadvantage of democracy, slow decision, because there are too many heads. Alright, after we discuss the political system, we will now move on to the political ideology. So what are types of political ideology? The first one is socialism. Socialism is political and economic theory of social organization that advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. So like China is a socialist country, and also some countries in South America, where they believe that everything that means of production, distribution has to be owned by or regulated by community as a whole. And then the second political ideology is capitalism, which basically what dominate the world. Capitalism is an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. Characteristics central to capitalism include private property, capital accumulation, wage labor, voluntary exchange, and a price system and competitive markets, which basically also what happens in Indonesia. So our economic system is a capitalistic system, because that's what we facing every day. So this is the illustration of the irony of free market capitalism. For example, in the US today, there are so many houses for sale because there are few rich people, but they don't know what to do with the money, so they just buy houses and they try to sell the houses. But at the same time, there are so many people who are not rich, who are homeless. So they don't have house, although there are houses available for they to stay or to live in, but since they don't have money, they can purchase it. So in one hand, there's these homeless people who lives in tent, but on the other hand, there are lots of peopleless homes, where homes are empty because nobody can buy them. So this is the illustration of the irony sometimes, because it is capitalistic. The rich become richer, the poor become poorer, and this is the consequences. Sometimes we have peopleless homes and also homeless people. And then the third political ideology is liberalism. This is a political philosophy or worldview founded on ideas of liberty and equality. So here citizens are free as long as they do not harm other citizens. Of course, we can see lots of countries in Europe uh, apply this liberalism. Indonesia not that liberal, yeah, because in liberal it means that you can be anyone, you can show whatever the identity you want as long as you do not harm others. But I don't think it happened in Indonesia because there are still peer pressure, social judgment that can prevent people from showing whatever they want to be. Yeah, so Indonesia is not liberal in a way, maybe pseudo liberal but not fully liberal. And then the next political ideology is communism. It is a political theory derived from Karl Marx, a German philosopher, that advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property is publicly owned and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. So the countries which are still communists are only maybe 5 in this world: Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, China, and Laos. As for the rest of the countries, they have different political ideology. So the only 5 communist countries are these countries. And then the next one is anarchism. So we have discussed about what anarchy is. This is a belief that government and laws are not necessary. So it believes that the state has no right to exist and no legitimate power. So each person has to be responsible for themselves. So this is quite scary because no one protect us, but at the same time there's no rules. We can do whatever we want. We have to protect ourselves. There's no regulation, no law, no government. Everyone for themselves. That is anarchism. And these are the last or another 4 types of political ideology. We have conservatism. This is a political and social philosophy promotes retaining traditional social institution in the context of culture and civilization. So maybe let's say the example in the Japanese society or government now, the newly appointed prime minister, Miss Tanai, is conservative because he wants to return to this culture and civilization of traditional Japan. So she is not uh, supporting this open immigration rules. So she wants to limit immigration. She doesn't care whether Japanese population is declining, as long as they can maintain their culture, traditional culture. Then uh, that should what Japan do in this situation, because they don't want to end up like Europe, who has lost its culture nowadays because of the immigrant. And then the second or the next political ideology is nationalism. This is a shared group feeling in the significance of a geographical and sometimes demographic region seeking independence for its culture or ethnicity that holds that group together. I think the word nationalism, we heard it most during the independence struggle or effort in the 1940s, yeah, when we are struggling against the Dutch who tried to return to Indonesia. And there's where our nationalistic patriotic feeling grows, because we feel that we are one as a nation. So there's a significance, this demographic and geographical similarities that we have to maintain. We don't want to lose to other people from different countries. So that's nationalism. And then fascism, this word I think derived from the Second World War uh, through the Nazi Germany. This is an authoritarian and nationalistic right-wing system. So when we heard right-wing, it means an extreme right, yeah, For example, they really want to have all white societies. So those who are not white is considered to be inferior. So that is right wing. So they see themselves as the most powerful and the most important beings based on their physics, for example. That's fascism. And then Zionism is a nationalist and political movement of Jews and Jewish culture. So Zionism specifically relates to the movement of Jews and Jewish cultures that supports the re-establishment of a Jewish homeland in the territory defined as the historic land of Israel. And this has been going on and on and on to this day. We see lots of movement, Free Palestine, and so on. So this is part of this also part of this struggle, who are fighting or trying to struggle against the Zionist movement, who try to claim the line of Israel as belonging to the Israel. All right, so those are the type of political ideology. So now I'd like to give you an example of China, which is an authoritative and capitalism at the same time. So the Chinese Communist Party's top priority remains what it has always been: the maintenance of absolute power, political power. So even though they are, let's say, autocracy or totalitarianism, but they are also capitalistic. So economic growth has not sparked democratic change as one-party rule persists. So through a sophisticated adaptation of its system, including leveraging the market to maintain political control, China's Communist Party has modernized its authoritarianism to fit the times. So this is how China adapt to the new world, where they maintain their authoritarian uh, rules or system, but at the same time they also want to fit the times by adapting uh, to the trend in the world economy. So the party has utilized a sophisticated strategy to maintain control of its populace. So while growing the economy, it has kept the majority of wealth in the hands of an elite class of business leaders, many of whom have willingly accepted authoritarian rule in exchange for getting rich. We have lots of examples like Jack Ma, for example. He becomes so rich, but he is still under control by the government. So every time he made a mistake, suddenly we will see him gone for 1-2 weeks without news, but then in the next 3 weeks we can see him returning with a kind of like different perspective. So it means that he has been called by the government and maybe got some punishment or something, but even the rich cannot do whatever they like, because they become rich because the government lets them. But if they do something that against the nation ideology, then there will be a harsh punishment even for the rich people. So far from forming a middle class that might challenge authority, these rich groups now have the reason to join their rulers in repressing instability among the people. So they try to not to maintain this middle class, which usually middle class are the one who challenge authority. So they refer to have this rich group that can repress instability in China. Meanwhile, the party has also deliberately stoked and shaped Chinese nationalism, and many inside China now feel pride in the government's model of authoritarian development. So how can we know that they are proud of the government's model? Well, I mean, take for example in this current situation where I think 2 weeks ago the Japanese Prime Minister said something about Taiwan, and that really hurts and offend China. And as a result, Chinese government say to the people they should not go to Japan. And just like that, maybe more than 80% of ticket has to Japan that has been purchased cancelled because, well, maybe because they're afraid of the government if they keep on going to Japan, or maybe they have this strong nationalistic feeling that because Japan has offended China, then they just canceled their trip to Japan. And China also say that there's no place for Japanese seafood or sea product in China. So that will hurt Japan a lot, because China is one of tourists. Most tourists are coming from China, and also they spend a lot of money. So when China tourists stop coming, it's gonna hurt Japanese tourism, in overall Japanese tourism. All right, so that's a case in China. So they are totalitarianism, but at the same time they also nationalistic, and they also capitalistic. And it's actually interesting because these systems are not aligned with each other, even contradictory to each other. But China managed to adopt this to this new era, and they can combine all these seemingly contradictory system into one that can maintain their country to this day. All right, so that's the end of this topic. And as usual, we will have our final presentation, group presentation, which will be held on the 19th of December, the last week before the Christmas New Year holiday. And I will put the guiding questions in the morning platform, so you're gonna check it maybe sometimes next week or this week. And after this, we will have a short quiz. So I will close the quiz at 9 a.m. So make sure that you watch this video before 9 a.m. because after 9 a.m. I will not accepting submission of quiz anymore. Okay, so this next is the link of the quiz, so please do it right away, at least still when you are still have fresh memories on what we have discussed. So I will close the quiz around 9 a.m. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation for this final topic. So prepare the presentation well, your last presentation, and just wait for the guiding questions in the morning platform. So I'll see you on the 19th of December online meeting for the last group presentation. Thank you very much and have a good day.